Story 1. A bit of information before the story. My parents introduced me to Lego when I was 5 years old. It was a Lego Technic set, and I successfully built it the first time. My interest in Lego Technic grew ever since, and I started doing the more difficult Lego sets, which I really enjoyed. In 2018, my grandmother passed away, and my family held a meeting with our extended family at our house. The house was packed since our home is not that large. Then, my entitled aunt and her son and husband came to our home. Everyone in my family disliked her very much because she never respected her own parents and carried a very unpleasant attitude. Everyone avoided her, and my mom was the one who approached her. My mom was confused because she hadn't sent her an invitation. My mom asked her why she came, and she answered, "I came here for the inheritance." The room went silent, and my mom was in shock at the reasoning she gave. Then entered the entitled son. He was 7 years old and went to the living room to play with the other kids. I had locked my room because he had entered it once before and dropped some of my Legos to the ground. Though I eventually built them back again, I didn't trust him to come into my room since these Lego sets took me days to build, and I didn't want to see them smashed on the ground. Shouting started in the living room between my entitled aunt and my uncle because she kept saying, "I deserve to claim all the inheritance and only me." This turned into a fight between the siblings, and I was scared since I wasn't used to hearing people shout that way, so I went to my room to take a break. As I was heading to my room, the entitled son followed me, though I didn't notice until I reached my door. He tried to sneak into my room, and I managed to stop him. He threw a fit and asked why I was not letting him in. I explained my reasoning, and he answered back, "It was just an accident." This wasn't actually the first time he had dropped my Legos by accident. Hearing those words made my blood boil, and I told him that this was the last time he would not be allowed to enter my room. His face was filled with anger, and he went back to his mom. I thought that was the end of it, but oh boy, was I wrong. I heard a knock on my door, and guess who it was? Of course, it was my entitled aunt. She looked annoyed, and this was the conversation that happened. "Entitled aunt, why are you not letting my son enter your room?" "Me? He dropped my Legos a lot of times, and I don't trust him in my room." Entitled aunt, "Oh, come on, it was just an accident." "Come on, entitled son, get in." The audacity of my entitled aunt was unbelievable when I had already told her no multiple times. She then went back to the living room. Entitled son, "Look, Legos, can you give them to me?" "Me? What the heck? No, I spent a lot of money to buy these, days to build them, and years to collect them. I do not trust you with my Legos because I know you are not going to take good care of them." At this point, the entitled son was angry and about to throw another fit. He went to his mom again, and I couldn't believe what he told her. "Entitled aunt, you said you were going to give your Legos to my son?" "Me? No, everything your son told you is a complete lie." Entitled aunt, "Just give him all of your Legos. Besides, you're too old to own these anyway." "Me? No, I will not." "This is your warning, entitled aunt." Entitled aunt, "Ugh, get out of my way." She then proceeded to push me really hard against the wall. My back was in pain, and I saw my entitled aunt and her son trying to grab the larger Lego sets off the shelf. I ran toward them and managed to take back my Legos, holding them safely away from their reach. My entitled aunt began to shout at me, calling me names and saying all sorts of insulting things. Apparently, her shouting was loud enough to be heard from the living room, and my mom and uncle came in to check what was going on. I was about to tell them what happened, but my entitled aunt quickly cut me off. She started telling her version of the story, but my mom immediately knew it was a lie. My mom told everyone that I would never give away my Lego sets and firmly told my entitled aunt to get out of the house. This made my entitled aunt so furious that she tried to pull my entire Lego shelf to the ground. I was shocked, but my uncle quickly stepped in, grabbing the shelf and holding it firmly to prevent her from pulling it down. My uncle was a tall and strong man with a long beard, and he firmly warned my entitled aunt to get out of the house and never come back. She was enraged, but she grabbed her son by the arm and stormed out of the house. I immediately thanked my uncle for helping me, and to my surprise, he even bought me a new Lego set afterward. That made me incredibly happy. To this day, everyone has cut contact with my entitled aunt. Later, we heard that her husband divorced her. He had a really good paying job and had finally had enough of her behavior. The last I heard, she was living in a small apartment. Story 2. This happened about 30-odd years ago, and my mother recounted it recently during a family dinner. So back in the 1990s, my mom worked for this big-time company, we'll call it Company W, as an accountant. Her boss, the head of finance, was a sleazy guy, and despite being semi-wealthy, it was a big company, and married with kids, he always tried to pick up younger women in the office. Eventually, after a few years, my mom, being the amazing accountant that she is, noticed small irregularities in several statements. I don't know the technical terms, but Mom realized that someone was embezzling the company's money for at least a couple decades. Concerned, she brought it up to the head of finance, who proceeded to demean her, call her names, botch her claim, and basically threatened to fire her if she brought it up again. My mother is not one to start crying, and instead sought to prove him wrong. However, a couple of months later, the head of finance brought in a new lady, young, she was legit blonde, fresh out of college, to be trained under Mom. My mother instantly knew what this was, and started putting out feelers for a new job. In the meanwhile, she trained the younger lady, who, to quote my mom, was not the brightest bulb. Now, Company W had a policy when an employee was going to be fired. If the employee was being fired, for reasons other than rule-breaking, violation, etc., they would be allowed to say that they quit to be able to give their week's notice and get pay. A fair policy. So one day Mom was summoned by the head of finance and told that he was firing her. She quickly counteracted and used the policy to her advantage, which angered the head of finance, but he had to comply. The malicious compliance I know you're waiting for. The head of finance told my mother in a rather rude way that since she was going about it that way, she might as well do an exit interview. My mother literally had a light bulb moment and said to him that in that case she would. To note, an exit interview is a formal way of leaving a job, akin to an interview for getting the job. It's a way for employees to share their experience and why they're leaving for records, including human resources. You can see where this is going. So, she was scheduled for the exit interview. When she went in, my mother had to, of course, bring in files relating to her work. I can't recall the exact reason, other than it having to be relevant to her reason for leaving, and show it to the interviewer. My mom brought in 3 large boxes of files, each one containing evidence of the embezzlement. She then presented it to the interviewer, who my mother told me was rather stunned, and proceeded to hand over all the evidence and proceed with her exit, including talking about the head of finance's reaction and how not long after the new lady was brought in to replace her. Mom then left the company that day, got new employment, and moved on. It was a decade later that she learned what happened. My dad was a delivery driver at the time and actually made a delivery to Company W. While there, he talked with an employee, mentioned my mom had worked there and how she left, and the employee told him quite the juicy story. In the year following my mother's departure and interview, her evidence was brought to Human Resources and the CEO, who ordered an internal investigation. Hidden cameras were placed in the accounting division. Every file made was screened and photocopied, tiny details scrutinized, and bank records triple-checked. I think you can see where this is going. Yep, the head of finance was embezzling from Company W. But it gets better. They got him, on camera, making out with the new lady inside the main office after hours. To add insult to injury, the cameras also caught him being cruel to those under him, touching other women, etc. But the biggest thing was still the embezzlement. Head of finance managed to, in over 30 years, steal over $1 million in Company W's earnings, from his days as a mere accountant and all through his promotions. Now, the exact way he was able to get that much over time wasn't told to my dad. I doubt the employee knew, but he did know the fallout. the head of finance was summoned to the Big Cheese's office the day after the evidence was compiled. And let's just say the head of finance wished he had simply been fired. He was arrested for the embezzlement and for inappropriate misconduct, as well as a few other things my mom can't recall. The new lady who came in actually revealed that he had brought her in after starting to date her, and even revealed to her what he was doing. Her job basically had been to help him cover it up so they could live the rich life. She didn't even know what exactly accounting was, other than managing money. The perfect cover, so to speak. And if the now ex-head of finance thought being arrested and charged was bad enough, when his wife found out, the employee who told my dad this hadn't been present when the wife had come in while the ex-head of finance had been let out. But a friend of his had seen what happened. She had just gone up, smacked the now ex-head of finance, screamed obscenities at him, before saying she'll be seeing him in court for a divorce. While my dad couldn't learn what exactly happened next, what was clear was that the guy's life was ruined. And my mom, while not a vindictive person by any means, did feel somewhat joyful over the outcome. Lesson to be learned here: never screw with an accountant who actually knows what they're doing. To clarify, the malicious compliance is that at the exit interview, my mother has to submit paperwork relating to why she left. So when the head of finance sarcastically told her she might as well go for it, she did, and presented all those files of evidence against him, stating why she left, including what he had said to her. This is not revenge because my mother never intended it to be. She actually didn't realize how deep it went, or that he was such a scumbag. She simply did exactly as she was told. Another thing to clarify: the CEO got involved because 1. Head of finance was leeching from their funds for a long time, and 2. They had been friends according to mom. Yikes. Also, please note she didn't learn of the fallout until a decade later. And from my dad, who was told by an employee from the company, and mom told me, if I did get something wrong, well, does the telephone affect anyone? Story 3. I was reminded of this after listening to some of my videos and some stories about entitled people at supermarkets. I worked at Walmart for a long time when I was younger, and honestly I loved it. But of course there is always that one day you just want to ask why some people behave the way they do. It was early in the morning, and for some reason or another I woke up with a scratchy throat. But I wasn't running a fever, and I honestly felt perfectly fine, so I took some vitamin C and went to work. However, before I was an hour into my shift, I had completely lost my voice. I usually worked customer service, but I would need to be able to communicate our policies and such, and of course I couldn't do that without my voice, so they asked if I would mind just being a cashier for that day, and I was good with that. Now on the register I would usually always ask how someone's day was, if they found everything that they were looking for, etc. But since I couldn't talk, I just smiled politely, did my job, and went about my day. One lady I spotted in my line seemed like she was having a particularly bad day already, and when working at Walmart you can usually spot these types of customers from a mile away. I knew before it was her turn nothing I did was going to make her happy, but at least I didn't have to talk to her, right? Of course I was bagging her groceries incorrectly. I did it as she instructed, and of course I was taking too long checking her out, because I was forced to rebag everything. She had a ton of coupons, which usually isn't a big deal, but unfortunately most of them were expired, and of course she threw a fit about me refusing to accept them. I know there is a code you can just type in even if it is expired. Just do your job. She yelled at me, but I just shook my head no and typed the code for my manager while focusing on the coupons that did work. Honestly, there is a code that we can type, and it will accept any coupon amount, but we only use it when there is a computer issue, or for any other reason a valid coupon is not being accepted. We do not use it to validate your expired coupons. She was getting more and more irritated with me, so I was so thankful my manager showed up to help me out, and of course this woman started screaming at her too about how I was a worthless employee, and I was being so rude to her, and began to start spouting these lies how I was talking back to her and being disrespectful and mouthy to her, and demanded we honor the coupons she had and blah, blah, blah. I deserve compensation fiasco. My manager looked at her confused. Ma'am, she lost her voice earlier today. She couldn't have said anything to you at all. And furthermore, we don't accept expired coupons under any circumstances. Please pay for your purchase and go," she said. But she was embarrassed now, I'm guessing, and still wanted to try and make me the bad person in this scenario. She was rude, though. She didn't even ask if I was having a good day or not or anything. I feel incredibly unwelcomed by her behavior. "Ma'am, I already told you she lost her voice. She can't talk today, but isn't sick, so we were letting her work today. Now please pay and leave, or do I need to call security?" she asked. The lady huffed, slammed her card into the machine to pay, and snatched her receipt before storming off. I could honestly swear she was in a bad mood and went shopping so she could take out her anger on the poor cashier, since we really can't fight back. I had seen this display many times before, and I could swear that was exactly what they are doing, because they will scream and rant at the dumbest things sometimes, and also when it's not even about their purchases, but the cashier is an easy target, and of course being a Walmart employee is practically worthless in their care and vision. My manager turned off my light and told me to finish out the customers in my line and then go work in claims for the rest of the day, which was just filling out paperwork and taking items from customer service either to the claims department or to put it back on the floor. It was better I didn't have to interact with customers. This was the first time I was accused of being rude, though, without even opening my mouth, which is so funny. Story 4. I'm a 30-year-old man from Mexico. I lived in Atlanta for a while and opened a small Brazilian bar, since I speak Portuguese and most of my friends are Brazilian. During that time, I met a girl from Portugal and we started dating. A few months into the relationship, she had a falling out with her roommate when their lease ended. She had nowhere to go, so I allowed her to move in with me. At the time, I was living alone with my dog in a 3-bedroom house. Later, her family came from Portugal, and I even let them stay as well. Everything was going well, and together we even started a cleaning company that began doing really well. Eventually, we decided to rent a larger place together. She was a wonderful person in many ways, except for the fact that sometimes she drank too much. The lease was under my name, since I was the one with the legal paperwork. On the very day we moved in, we had a silly argument so small that I cannot even remember the reason now. Unfortunately, arguments continued happening, so eventually we agreed to break up, but to keep the business split 50-50 and continue living together until the lease ended. One night, her mother knocked on my door, saying that my ex was acting strangely. I went to check and saw that she was just drunk and half asleep. We even joked a little, and I told her mother to let her rest. The next day, around 8 p.m., I heard her weakly calling my name. I went to her room and saw her vomiting. At first, I assumed it was a hangover. But when she looked at me, she was pale, her lips had turned blue, and she was barely able to speak. She pointed at the bed, where there was a half-empty bottle of Tylenol Night with pills scattered around. She had overdosed. I immediately called emergency services and checked her pulse. While I was on the phone, she suddenly stopped breathing. I was completely panicked. I started performing CPR right away. Thankfully, paramedics soon arrived and took her away. She survived, but she spent 10 days in the hospital and another 10 in a psychiatric hospital. She was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. During her time in treatment, she did not want me to leave her side. After she came back home, she even slept in my room again because she did not want to be alone. For about a week, things felt almost normal again, but soon the chaos started up once more. What truly shook me was what had happened that night. Watching her almost lose her life in my arms really affected me. After she got out of the hospital, I could not eat properly, and I dropped almost 15 kilograms, about 30 pounds, because I simply never felt hungry. I could not sleep more than 2 hours a night. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see her face turning blue. Later, I realized that it was post-traumatic stress disorder, but at the time I only thought I was falling apart. She started seeing someone else almost immediately. That was fine. We were already done. But then, one day, she barged into my room claiming that she was renting my room and that I needed to move out. I laughed at the idea and told her to leave my room instead. The lease had both our names on it anyway. A week later, I was eating breakfast when 6 sheriffs suddenly banged on the door with their guns drawn. She had filed a temporary restraining order against me, claiming that I had threatened and hurt her. They escorted me out of the house with only my dog. I was not allowed to take my wallet, cash, clothes, or anything else. For the next 2 weeks until the court date, I lived in my Camaro with my dog. I showered at the gym and used convenience store bathrooms to stay clean. I tried to get free legal help, but nobody was willing to take my case. One night, police officers woke me up after someone had reported me. I explained my situation, and one of the officers asked, "Wait, do you live in that house with the cars parked outside?" It turned out that they were the exact same officers from the night I performed CPR on my ex. They could not believe what had happened. They gave me the incident report number, their names, and even told me they would testify on my behalf if necessary. The court date finally arrived. She showed up with her family, 3 friends, and a lawyer. I showed up completely alone. I was nervous and thought I was done for. But in the end, the judge did not believe a single word of her false claims. The judge even warned her not to use the court system as a tool for revenge again, or else she could face charges herself. I walked out feeling relieved. However, when I returned home, I discovered that my room had been completely emptied. My cash, cards, passport, and visa were all gone. My flight back to Mexico was only a couple of days away anyway, so I ended the lease, paid the penalty, donated what was left of my belongings, left my car outside, and flew back home to Mexico. What a nightmare it all was. Story 5. This is a slightly older story, and while I remember a few pretty specific lines that my friend and I still joke about, most of this is generally paraphrased. Back when I was graduating high school, my mom informed me that my graduation gift was going to be a trip to Disney, and that my best friend, Bella, could come too. So keep in mind Bella was 18, and I turned 18 the next month. We spent most of our time in the Epcot showcase, usually Japan. We had the pass to skip around from park to park and opted to eat in Epcot, Japan nearly every day. Since we had the meal plan package, we had been given a few snack options to use through the week. Honestly, the food we would eat during the meals was so much food that we never really used any of the snacks during the majority of the week. So we hatched a plan that took weeks to use the remainder of our snack options on sushi and pastries from Epcot, France, after we got lunch at our usual spot. We popped into the small eatery in Epcot, Japan, and picked a table near the front. We had started to eat when entitled Dad, okay-ish wife, and their 2 kids came in and flocked to the table next to us. The kids don't play a huge part since one was pretty much a toddler in a stroller, and the other couldn't have been older than like maybe 5. They sit down and grab a high chair for the toddler. The entitled dad then tried to wrestle with this massive mech of a stroller. I think he was trying to fold it down smaller and was getting stressed, so he's fiddling and yanking at random sections of it. Well, his annoyance clearly takes over and jerks what I think was the handle of the stroller back. He doesn't quite manage this well and ends up launching his hand back from the momentum. This was enough to punch a hole through the paper lantern light above the table. Now this may have not been a massive problem had there not been a very clear sound of glass shattering. The poor lantern was hanging lopsided from a thread. The family collectively stared at the lantern for a few moments before they quickly packed up their kids and moved to a table on the other side of the small eatery. Bella and I sat there in disbelief, staring at the light fixture that looked like it would fall over any second. We thought over telling someone, thinking maybe the family would do it, but once they hunkered down to eat, we lost all faith in that. The tables were close enough at this time that if it fell, it would either come down directly on us, or if we were lucky, fall to the other side of the table. Either way, it would be a glass mess that someone would have to clean up. A lady working there walked by us, and we briefly stopped her, quietly pointing to the lantern and saying we saw someone accidentally break it. I specifically did not point the family out. She looked stunned, thanked us, shuffled away, sat one of those wet floor signs on the table to have people avoid sitting there, and we saw her start a conversation with someone on the other side of the food service counter. We felt good about that, went back to eating, and everything was great. Only no, not really. This story wouldn't be here if that's how it went. I see Bella making a confused face while looking at something behind me, so I look behind me, only to be looking up at the entitled dad from my seat. Why in the world do you think that was your business? Bella and I just stared at him confused for a moment. Neither of us really sure what to say to this complete stranger. This is when he decided to pronounce it out, word by word, like we were stupid. Why in the world do you think that was your business? Me? I heard you the first time. It's not like I mentioned you're the one who did it. I thought that maybe this is what he was concerned about, since maybe he thought he may need to pay for it or something. That's not what I asked you. Why in the world do you think that was your business? Looking around confused, I said, I didn't want it to fall on someone. Still not what I asked. How was this your business? I was a bit confused how that didn't answer his question, and we just had a few seconds staring competition before it just dawned on me that he was just crazy. Because I didn't want to eat glass-flavored sushi. You should have just ignored it. It wasn't your problem. At this point, I was over being yelled at by some dude I didn't know with a weird need to act like he's my dad. Me. I know you think you can say whatever you want to us because you're 1,000 years old and think you own everyone younger than you. But man, you broke it and ran away. The only person you should be mad at is yourself, because you can't use your adult words to talk to a server about something you broke, and instead, you need to yell at someone less than half your age to feel like you control the situation. Super paraphrased here, but I did hit on these points to some degree. I just don't remember exact words. I could tell he was winding up to yell back when his wife stepped in, calling him back to the table. He turned around to argue with her, and at this point we just decided to yeet out. No management or police, but yikes, that was a weird moment. All good though. We ate so much sushi and pastries that night we couldn't manage dinner later. Story 6. Name change. I was informed that calling this charming woman demanding made me a huge jerk and a huge Karen, so moving forward she will be called Darling Debbie. Debbie lived directly behind our house. She lived alone, except when her husband, Fred, came to mow the lawn, do yard work, and get yelled at in the yard in front of the entire neighborhood. There were several occasions that made us more than a little concerned. Whenever Fred came over, the neighbors on the street she lived would call all their children into the house. I mean, 1 minute there would be 8-10 kids playing, and then ghost town. This is because Debbie would go out front to greet Fred in a very bitter manner. The following conversation took place on a beautiful Saturday morning. Fred, getting out of his car. Hey. Debbie, cutting him off. Where the heck have you been? I've been waiting all morning. But honey, it's only 9 a.m. Debbie, cutting him off again. Exactly. You should have been here at 7. I said I'd be here at 9, and I'm here. Shut the heck up. Debbie, throwing the newspaper at Fred. Don't you talk to me like that. I'm your wife. Now get your butt to work. These were their normal conversations. Sometimes they were much worse. Another Saturday morning we noticed Fred sitting on the patio in a lawn chair. He was visibly ill. His face was beet red, and we were concerned that he was having a heart attack or a stroke. Debbie was not going to allow her husband to sit idle while he still had chores to attend. She berated him mercilessly until he just got up, didn't say one word, and left. He was back about 2 weeks later. Debbie hired 2 handymen to enclose the lanai. They put windows up on the peak of the roof and 5 sets of sliding glass doors all the way around. It was so much nicer to look at from a neighbor's perspective. Debbie is somewhat of a hoarder and had so much junk on her lanai. It was so nice once we didn't have to look at things she picked out of the trash. Not against dumpster diving or upcycling, but she never did anything with the stuff. By far the most disturbing incident with Debbie and Fred happened on a Saturday. Fred only came to do chores on Saturday. The rest of the time he lived in a small apartment alone. After Debbie had the lanai enclosed, Fred hadn't been over for a few weeks, and he was furious with Debbie when he saw the work that had been done. We couldn't see them, since the lanai was enclosed and had blinds in between the glass on all the sliding glass doors, but we could hear them. "What the heck did you do?" he screamed at her. "I had to do something. I couldn't just look at the neighbor's ugly yard anymore," referring to our yard. "You never even asked me. This cost me $15,000. Where am I supposed to get the money? Fred is retired." She started screaming in a language that I don't understand. After what truly sounds like fighting, they come out into the yard. Debbie has collected every piece of wood that the contractors hadn't used and every piece of scrap that they cut and were going to discard. "What am I supposed to do?" Fred asked. "I need you to cut all this wood so that I can burn it in the fire pit." "I didn't know that's what you needed today. I don't have a table saw with me. I'm going to have to come back next weekend to cut this wood." "I have a saw you can use." "Where did you get a saw?" "One of the construction men left it one night and I took it." Debbie goes into the house and comes out with a handsaw. "This won't work. It will take a week to cut all this wood with this little saw. Then we need to get started." Fred tries again to explain why this just won't work, but in the end he attempts to cut up some of the wood. Now Debbie only has the saw and none of the other equipment needed to safely cut wood. But they attempt to improvise. There is a small concrete bench in the yard. Debbie places a piece of lumber on the bench and stands on the board so that Fred can see it down to a manageable size for Debbie to burn. This was pretty amusing to watch for a while, until Fred just stopped and told Debbie that he can't do this by hand. Debbie insisted he try again. Fred complied, and while he was sawing, Debbie jumped off the board, and it snapped back and hit Fred in the head. Fred's head is now bleeding profusely. "What the heck did you do that for?" he asked. "You need to listen to me. When I tell you to do something, you do it." "Well, I can't work now. I have to go to the hospital." Debbie picks up the board and holds it like a baseball bat. "Now what are you doing?" "You can't leave. You're not finished. You can go when all the wood is cut." Fred had enough. Debbie is blocking his path to leave. Fred just backs up and goes around the house to his car. This part was relayed by another neighbor. As Fred got into his car, Debbie came running from the backyard and hit Fred's car with a 2x4. Fred flipped her the one-finger salute as he peeled out of the driveway. Debbie never got the wood cut. She attempted to burn the 6-foot lengths of lumber in her small fire pit, until the fire department and police showed up because of the smoke. That's Debbie.